And we are live. How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the Art of Game Mastery's Finding Paths stream. I'm John. This is my co-host Jack. I got the direction right this time. um, Today we're going to be talking about one-shots, which is something I know both of us have a lot of opinions on. Some of them are the same, some of them are different, so it should be an interesting discussion. Jack, you want to kick us off on this one? I know you're the one who brought this topic, wanted to do this topic real bad, so what do you think about these things? Like, what's the best way to go about them? Well, first of all, I think we should actually, before we get into how one-shots work and everything, there's kind of two different kinds of one-shots, I feel like, and they might not be... there's a bit of confusion around the terminology there, and I don't know what the correct description of it is, but I know that some people consider one shots to be literal one shots, where like they take one session in and out, one and done. And then there's some people who consider one shots to be like one scenario, where it might be a few sessions long, might be, you know, a handful of sessions long. And I don't necessarily know one's more correct than the other. I don't know. What's your idea of what a one shot is, Jack?
Well, I have really stretched the meaning of what a one shot is these days, and that's what we're going to cover here between what I call small shots or many shots, something, in the middle. But typically to me, a one shot is a specific event where you are not playing for any kind of long-term solution. So you're spending all of your money, all of your resources, just this one game. It's only tonight, that kind of mindset.
So you're more in the camp of a one shot lasts one session, one night. After that, it's over kind of deal. Like ideally, right? Is that what I'm understanding?
That is ideal.
That's kind of the camp I'm in as well, though. So for games like Fate or some of the more indie narrative RPGs with a lot, very streamlined system, very like rules light, so to speak, I think it's a lot easier to do. With games like Pathfinder and D&D, where combat's a big part of it, and combat, as we know, can take a while, especially if you have larger parties, I feel like it's much more difficult to fit an entire scenario into a single session, even if you're running like a 4-hour session. Like today, we ran a Shifting Sands game, right? And we did manage to do that, but we barely managed to do it in 4 hours. And we really didn't quite finish either. Like, we didn't actually turn in the quest that you guys completed. But, for the most part, we completed it. So I think that was one of the rare times where it does fall into place for me. But I think more often than not, when I prep for a one shot, it ends up taking 2 or 3 sessions. And arguably that's partially my fault. I planned too much. I know that was certainly the case for the Fate actual play we did the first part of, and we still have to do the second couple parts for. But I think that it's kind of, with games like Pathfinder and D&D especially, it's kind of hard to plan a session that is only going to take a single session, because you never know what your players are going to, what direction they're going to go off in and kind of play around somewhere. Like, you guys spent a lot of time today in town, a lot more than I expect you to. But yeah, I mean, when you run one shot, do you normally let them last a single session, or do they ever go over?
That is the problem with my one shots. So I have met at basically like taverns or friends' houses for specific occasions, people's birthdays, where we've played just a one shot. It was that one night.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that my one shots end up being a bit like side quests, where they end up taking just a few more sessions to kind of get through.
So I guess I'm trying to understand your alignment here. So you're saying that ideally one shot should take one session, but it's hard to do that, right? Is that what you're trying to say?
I I have a hard time executing that
Yeah, okay.
because
I'm
my
the same way.
expectation
Yeah.
for what's going to happen in a game can sometimes I'm trying to pack too much in there. Usually, you're worried about um,
Having too little content, and you end up over
you don't
prepared.
want them to breeze through the combat and be completely done, and then find that boring.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's a delicate balance that, you know, a GM's going to be concerned with no matter what style of game they're playing. But you know, given the natures of one shots, I feel like the stakes are much higher because if you under prepare a one shot, you're kind of boned, right? Because now all of a sudden they have nothing to do, and if you try to come up with something on the spot, it's hard to come up with something that fits in like 30 minutes, say, right, or an hour or whatever, however much time you have left. But if you over prepare, now all of a sudden there's no like satisfying ending to everything unless you go over and do more sessions, which everyone has to be on board with. So it's kind of like finding that balance is really hard, I think, as a game master. And you know, if you're running a full-on campaign, it's not that big of a deal because there's always next week, right? Or if you're running it, or if they spent too little time on it, then you can just prepare a bigger quest that's going to go over next week anyway. So it's kind of that balance isn't as difficult for when you're running a longer spanning game. But yeah, I agree with you. So what are some, in your opinion, what are some approaches you can take to try to mitigate that? Like, what are some tricks you've come up with over the years?
What are my tricks for compiling down my expectations or making the game just be one shot?
Yeah, like
It's kind
trying to fit. Sorry, my dog just started fighting with each other. Trying to fit a a session you've prepared into a one shot. Like when you're planning your session, what are some tricks you've come up with in order to try to gauge that time frame more accurately?
Okay, my biggest problem is that I'll usually do about 3 encounters when I probably only need one.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say encounters, I don't necessarily mean combats.
Right.
The
Social
example of
encounters
like
or
that one shot that we threw when we were at Gen Con, I had initially planned for there to be basically a little bit of investigation, a little bit of exploration, and then end that with a combat.
Mm-hmm.
And that ended up being the right amount for a one shot. We were done with that. How long did that game take? 2 hours? 3 hours?
Yeah, like 2.5 hours, something like that. It was the perfect sizing for a conference one shot. I felt like, and I think in that game didn't we have a new player as well? Someone who had not played Pathfinder 2e. I can't recall.
Yeah, we had new players pretty much at all of the games that we played at Gen Con. So
Yeah,
not a lot of people had.
that was
Everybody
actually
had
something.
somebody in the group.
Sorry, go ahead.
Everyone had somebody in their group that was, had not been exposed to Pathfinder 2. Either they had played a Pathfinder First Edition or had just only played Fifth.
Yeah, that was actually something I ran into when prepping for the Shifting Sands game for today. Is that we actually had some people who were new to Pathfinder. We had people who were new to Foundry or newer to Foundry. We had people who, we had a group of people who hadn't really played together in a game yet. And I think that was these dogs, man. Can you do that somewhere else? Like you're doing it just right there, right when I'm trying to stream. Anyway, so where was I going with this? Oh yeah. So we had all these like things that take up time in a session, right? So like new players have to figure out how to play the game. New people to Foundry, we have to play around. Or, like even I learned a lot of things about Foundry that I didn't know when I was playing today. So there's time explaining that to people. There was time taken away from just kind of figuring each other out, trying to get each other's vibes and figure out what's cool with who. So there's all those things that take time, and then on top of that, you have to figure out, okay, well, how much time is that going to take, and how much time are they actually going to be able to spend playing the game, right? And that's difficult, and I'm actually really surprised I was able to pull that off with all those things, against us there. And I think the players are just as, they take just as much credit for it as I do, in that you guys were very efficient in combat. Our combat encounters were very on point. Like everyone knew what they were doing. Like even the new players were like, okay, this is what I want to do. How do I do it? You know what I mean? So like everyone was on point. Combat didn't take terribly long, even though like the last combat you guys went through was basically an entire dungeon in waves because of the way you guys approached it. Um, I thought it went really well, and I was really surprised at how fluid things went.
That went that went a little too smooth. That was
Yeah.
it was great up, and that went by really quickly. Um,
So
there's a lot of things to think about, like when you're planning a one shot that you really can't plan for.
mhm,
Like finding out who's going to actually show up to the table. When I plan one shots, I usually know who's going to be there and like what level of skill they are,
yeah,
so I can plan in advance for that kind of thing. But when we start off with a game, say like at a Gen Con show or reaching out to Discord to a bunch of online people that we just met, we probably should be planning for extra time because we had to do some meet and greet here.
yeah,
Like you said, finding out vibing, we kind of need to go in a circle and kind of introduce ourselves. And that would be the same for in a group that you already know, but your introductions will be a little bit more streamlined since you'll just be introducing your character, your ancestor, your class, like what your character is.
right. Um, Spiker, stop messages on Discord. We're busy. Um, so got completely threw off my train of thought just now. So one of the things I like to do uh, is to design something and then cut back. You know what I mean? So like when I have an idea of the plot line, the encounters I want to include, and I design it all, but then I cut stuff afterwards. I'm like, okay, this is what I expect to happen. I'm gonna pull out 20% of it, and then like put it on the side and be like, okay, if I need it, it's there, but I'm not gonna plan to use it unless I have to. So it's kind of like it's prepped and it's there if I need it, but um, I don't want to. I don't want to have it in there and like expect it to be there because if we're running low on time, I want to be able to have a path through. So
Is a good idea. I mean, it almost seems like you're planning for like some randomness in that regard.
right. It's like I don't. It's kind of like when. So I'm a software engineer by trade, right, in the game industry, video game industry, and when we're planning our work for what we call our sprints, which are basically 2 week intervals, um, we all get together and say we expect this to take this much time, or we expect this task to be this size of a task, right? And then we always pad that by like 20%. It's the same kind of thing if you run a business, right, and you're trying to build timelines. You always want to pad it or figure out costs, right? You always want to pad whatever you think by like 20%. It's the same kind of deal here, except that you're subtracting, right? Like you're saying, okay, I think this is gonna take this much time, but I'm probably gonna be wrong. So I'm gonna take off this 20%, cut it out, keep it on the side here, and if I do need it, it's there available to me, and I can kind of slide it in, slip it in, and maybe I slip it in somewhere else too. That's also an option depending on what you're running. Um, but kind
I
of
mean,
expect things to take
sounds like
longer
a
than you
lot of
planned
work.
for. What was that?
That sounds like a lot more work for like my
Well,
one
it's really
shots.
not,
I
right?
am
Because you're
super
prepping
linear
the
and
same
go.
amount. You're just saying, okay, I'm gonna pretend I didn't prep this, and then in the moment, I'm like, okay, we're running up on 3 hours. We've got about an hour left. They're about three-quarters of the way through this. Um, you know, we could probably get done in an hour. So I'm gonna slide this one encounter I had originally planned but cut out in just to try to pad some time. You know what I mean? But it's I don't know. It's just a way. It's just a way I've learned to deal with it, and I think it's worked for the most part. There's definitely been times it hasn't worked. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Do you have any other
Got
tricks like that? That
Well, you got to know your group size. We had, I think I cut out that or you cut out.
nope. I hear you.
So if you know your group size, that can play a big role. For one of my birthday games, one of my best friends decided to throw me a surprise one shot for my birthday, and they didn't realize that we were going to have like 20 people there and 12 people wanting to play.
Mm-hmm.
So they had planned for about 3 encounters, which was when they had asked me absentmindedly of like what to do in a one shot. I had given that suggestion about look for 3 different things, whether it be exploration, 3 combats, or a combination of some kind of mystery solving, something simple and straightforward. Told them that, and so they had designed kind of like 2 encounters and some exploration to go into a dungeon, and for all 12 of us to play, we managed to get through one single combat, just because
Yeah. Were you playing all in one game, like all together, like the party of 12?
All 12 of us played in one game.
Yeah, it's
so
tough.
you know what, he did really well. That was his first game and one shot, and that was a game back in 3.5, which has a little bit more assembly than like 5th edition does.
Mm-hmm.
And so I noticed that when we were setting up for Pathfinder, so if you're setting up for Pathfinder, character creation takes, would you agree, it takes longer?
Yeah.
So that is something to think about. When you're doing a one-shot for 5e, you've got these, little cutout builds that you can kind of, there's very little work that needs to go into it, whereas with Pathfinder, there's so many more things to choose from your, your ancestry to your ancestral feat. You don't have to really pick those when choosing your race in 5th edition.
Yeah, you bring a good point, and it is, around character creation, and I think that usually when I run for a one shot that's like specifically a one shot for a group of new players, especially, I like to pull out template like pre-generated characters, because that cuts off a lot of time, right? Or the alternative is to plan the characters together in advance. And with thanks to things like Discord and whatnot, that's a lot easier these days. Even if the game is in person, it can really behoove you to get that quote unquote session 0 out of the way, virtually and asynchronously via something like Discord ahead of time, so that you're not wasting time, during your game actually building the characters. But let's my train of thought, it keeps going. The Discord messages are going crazy across my screen. It keeps throwing off my train of thought. I'm sorry, audience.
we gotta like figure out a way to mute. With my Discord.
What was I going with this? One shots. So one shots. I think we've talked about what they are a bit, but let's talk about when to use them, right? So when do you think one shots are appropriate versus something like a campaign? I mean, the obvious situation is when you only have one night to play, right? But like in my opinion, another great use case for one shots is when you have new character or new players and you want to ease them into the game without something like super commitment heavy. That's. Can you think of any other situations where that might be?
Well, to explore that option, so not really anything new, but to just kind of flesh it out. We had talked about how to spice up your Halloween games, so those tend to be great for one shots right around that time when you want to throw that costume party or get together for that special occasion. Those are usually, I feel like there is way more Halloween one shots than there is, say, like Yule or Winter Solstice games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, holiday events are great for one shots because you have a lot of people, all gathered in the same area. I mean, I'm making the assumption here that you're someone who goes to events for holidays. Okay, if you're not one of those people, that's fine. But if you are one of those people, there's generally a lot of people all in one area congregating. A lot of them probably haven't played before, but may be interested. A lot of them probably never even thought to play before, maybe don't even know what it is, and maybe it can intrigue them. It's a great way to get people into the hobby by going to these events and saying, hey, let's play some D&D, let's play some Pathfinder, let's play some kind of tabletop RPG. A lot of them probably be like, oh yeah, I've always wanted to try that. Or maybe some will be like, I don't know what that is, but heck with it, it's something to do. Let's have some fun.
I know, like when I was a kid and I was at Christmas parties or New Year's parties,
mm-hmm.
Usually, the parents would be off doing all of the cooking, or, we were supposed to be off doing other playing. Like specifically all of us were together and throwing together a D&D game on one of those nights, like a Christmas party night or a New Year's evening night, we usually had so many hours to play, and we would be completely unbothered. And the last thing, our parents would have cared is if we were all in one spot, rolling some dice and playing a game together.
Right.
So,
Um, one event that an old coworker of mine told me about that happened at Gen Con one year for them, which I thought was really cool, and I've always wanted to see happen at some kind of event, and maybe even put one on myself. But they had this giant table of like terrain, right? Like actual like physical terrain pieces. And in the back of the table was this giant castle. And as you went further away from the castle, different kinds of terrain were there. Like there was forest, there was snow, there was desert, etc. And in each of these, throughout the whole table, there were just waves and waves and waves of these monsters. And these things were like hulking things, like giants and dragons and all kinds of these crazy, just massive beasts, right? High level, etc. And the person who was running the game just had a stack of character sheets, right? Just like literally just one on top of the other, like a big stack of them, right? Because people were dying left and right. And basically, you got in line and you grabbed whatever character sheet was on top of the pile. Like it didn't matter what you wanted to play; what you got is what you got. And basically, collectively, everyone was trying to get from the rear of the table to defeat the demon lord in the castle, right? And people they were all like, there were characters at level 1, there were characters level 20. There was like this, it was luck of the draw, right? And it sounded really fun because like you had a group of people who would just oh, I got a level 3 ranger, right? Like how am I going to best take advantage of this to, like, I know I'm going to die, like I'm up against all these things, but how can I whittle away at the most I can with this opportunity? And then when you die, you get the back of the line and you go through again, right? And it sounded really fun. I thought, that's like a really good way to run a holiday style game, especially if you're at somewhere like, for those of you in Orange County, you might be familiar with a brewery called Gamecraft. If Gamecraft puts something like this on for, I don't know, Halloween or whatever, right? I think it'd be really cool. It would, you don't have to be, and this was for like D&D 2nd edition, I think you said. So the rules were pretty light for the most part, so it's pretty easy to pick up and go quickly. But I thought that was really cool, and I've always wanted to try running something like that. It's kind of a different take on a one shot, right? It's not really your typical one shot. It's more like taking D&D and making it an event, right? But,
that's so that guy must have put a ton of work into all those character sheets.
so as far as from what I understand, he literally just went online on a character sheet generator and just pressed the button a bunch of times and took whatever it got.
I would do that differently. I would be stealing like characters from my players, like just get their consent and be like, hey, I want to feature your character in my slog fest to like get like a bunch of different varied level characters.
Yeah. But I mean, you'd have to have a lot, right? Like you'd have to have like hundreds, which would be, putting all those together would be tough. I don't know. Maybe you've had hundreds of characters at different levels, but I don't think I have.
I wish we could see if anyone thinks that kind of event would be awesome. So when to use a one shot? So we talked about mostly it's those exciting events. What was your other suggestion for when to throw a one shot? New players.
Like parties, like just getting together with groups of people.
Okay. What I tend to use one shots for, and I use them quite often, is to break up a long running campaign. Sometimes we've talked about before where like players kind of just show up on a specific night, every Tuesday night players show up and they're like, what we do is Pathfinder, what we do is D&D, this is the game that we're here to play. And I feel like people can get kind of into a routine with the game. I don't want the game to be a routine. Like if it were, we would probably be playing a different style of game, maybe a video game instead of a tabletop. And so I use one shots as kind of like the season finale. So when when we're at a good point in the story arc to kind of end, I'm going to have a little, fall break, a little winter break in there, and I want to throw in the one shot. And this is also kind of really helpful for GMs who are constantly coming up with ideas. I don't know if anybody else is in that camp, where I've got so many ideas and I'm writing them all down, and I'm kind of sad to watch them go to waste. So I'm always wanting. I've got several one-shot ideas in my
Mm-hmm.
head, and I want to just kind of run these different ideas, or I'd like to think that they are going to be full fleshed out stories. And the problem is that I'm already invested in a game. It's going to be really hard to make time to have a second game or a third game.
Yeah, in your Tagasia game, I thought it was interesting when you did your first kind of season ending one shot, or I guess season opener
Mm-hmm.
one shot, depending on how you want to look at it. Um, it was like it was the same world and like characters that were in the world, but it was in the past. So it was like, and then like in the next season, we kind of like saw references to these characters we met in the one shot, which I thought was a neat approach to that I hadn't really seen before. For me, I like having those like scenario ending seasons, so to speak, but I like using those as an opportunity for everyone to take a break and recharge, especially me if I'm game mastering, because as a game master, it takes a lot of energy and effort to keep building these worlds and everything. And sometimes you just need to take a step back and chill. Like, so this, with the stress of everyday life along with it, you just kind of need a break. So I like to use those kind of breaks in the story as a way to do that. But the one shot idea is actually pretty neat. I've never actually seen that done before. So kudos to you for thinking of that.
So to fill in some more information on what John is referring to, um, I I did a one shot as like a season hiatus to fill in and flesh out some backstory. So some of the characters were getting pretty heavily invested in some of the stories and some of the plot lines. And if you're doing something with, I don't know, vampires, aberrations, elves, and fey creatures, they tend to live for thousands of years, and they might have really long and complex backstories. And some of that stuff might be a burden on the players to sit and listen to. And if you're not throwing out those breadcrumbs and giving a reason to this backstory, this lore for your players to get invested in, it could just seem like a dump and a waste of time. So to enhance the story, I had the players. They did not know that they were going to be playing in the same world as kind of like an intro to like a typical JRPG. I think was it Lufia? Lufia 1 and 2 were
Lunia,
pretty
or
much
no,
inspired me. John, have you played those games?
Lunar 1 and 2. Is that what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where they basically, it starts off with the heroes of origin and their badassery, level 20 powerhouse characters. Wasn't that the biggest reason behind us doing that one shot? Was we wanted to see how Pathfinder's level 20 worked?
I think that
That
was a
is,
major consideration. Yeah.
well, we voted. We wanted to see a commoner game or a level 20
Yeah.
game. So a commoner game would have been, everybody would have been level 0, and it would have been, kind of like a slaughterhouse of common folk people trying to
Kind of
band
like in
together.
Dragon Age, where you start and you're like, you have your little prologue where
Yes,
you're
Dragon
nothing
Age.
yet. You're just a noble son or something, and
Mm-hmm. And so the level 20 idea won out. I recommend if anybody's planning on doing a one shot and they've already played some of Pathfinder, doing a level 20 game is a great way to see just how balanced their games all the way to the very end. And ask me if I'd like to do that with 5th edition.
well, you couldn't really do it with fifth edition. The game would just fall apart. But
Yeah. Oh,
I've
just like
I've
land
actually
just
both run and played in a level 20 fifth edition game, and it was not as fun as I thought it would be in either case. It was, as a GM, it was incredibly frustrating, and as a player, it was just kind of, I don't know. It really didn't feel any different than running a lower level game, in my opinion. Like, yeah, you had more spells and you did more damage and things like that, but just the way the game mechanically worked, it just didn't feel any different to me.
Wow. I had like a different problem entirely with my 5th edition playing a max level game where we were so brokenly overpowered that the GM, like what they had prepared, they didn't feel was adequate as a challenge for us. We disintegrated a dragon in one shot.
Totally,
Um,
yeah. That's what I meant by as a GM. It's really frustrating, but that's what I mean. Like as a player, it's just boring because there's no tension. There's no. It just doesn't feel good, in my opinion. It doesn't feel satisfying, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Um, but yeah, I mean that's one of the most common complaints about 5e, right? Even among 5e players, is that and it's why official adventure paths typically end at level 10 or 11, because beyond that is when things start to go downhill, which is fine, like whatever. Admittedly, it takes a long time to get to level 10 or 11, even in D&D, the way the level scaling works. In Pathfinder 2e, I feel like you breeze through those levels a lot quicker because it's just a flat 1,000 EXP per level. Assuming you're using XP and not like milestone leveling or something. But so I don't know. I mean, it's a common complaint about 5e, but I don't think it's that big of a deal because you just don't play at high levels. That's also all there is to it. And I don't know. What are you going to say?
That's a great one-shot option if you're looking to see just the extent of how I recommend that. Lines is talking about the commoner option. There are some, would you call them variant rules?
I'd have to. I mean, there are variant rules, but I'd have to see where you're going with this line of thought before I could say whether.
There are some variant rules where players will, GMs or players will be like, hey, this variant rule seems really interesting. I want to see what it would be like in the game. And a GM who's already invested hugely entirely into their main plot is like, nah, let's not do that because I don't want to risk derailing the game or breaking the game. That's a perfect time to throw in a one-shot when your players are looking for, spicing up the rules a bit and trying some of these alternate rule systems.
Yeah, I mean, playtesting is a prime candidate for one-shots, right? Because you can target the campaign to exactly what you want to test and try to give what you want to test the most quote-unquote screen time as you can. So you can really drill down on what you're trying to test and figure out the answers you're looking for. That's probably, I mean, I used our West Marches game as kind of my testing bed for things like that. But admittedly, West Marches games, if done right, are basically a series of one-shots for the most part. So it's kind of the same thing. But yeah, I mean, when Paizo releases a lot of their playtest material, they release a lot of one-shots or mini adventure paths, like 2 or 3 sessions to go along with it, so you can have something to play them in to kind of figure them out. What were you going to say?
I was just thinking about how it's kind of like a multi-shot because they're like, it's almost episodic in range. I like, based on the research I did on my, one-shots and then like just us feeding back, there's like so many different variables to what makes, a one-shot. Because
no one agrees. That's what I was kind of getting to at the beginning of this. No one really agrees on what a one shot is fundamentally. That's the hard part,
right? And so, but there's so many uses and practicality for for a drive-by game where you're just going to show up, and deliver, and you might never see those people again. Specifically, at conventions, it's a great time to kind of show off, the rule set. So I think. A different thing to look at for when you're throwing one-shots, not just for Pathfinder, but sometimes one-shots are really great for throwing down a different, game into your mix, from Starfinder to Call of Cthulhu.
I was just about to say that. It's a really good way to kind of broaden your horizons, expand your palette.
Absolutely.
Without committing to an entire maybe you guys end up playing it and not liking it. You don't really want to deal with a whole campaign of it. But you still can, if it's a one shot, you can still kind of get your satisfying ending, even if the system isn't for you, which I think is good. But yeah, I mean, I'd also say that with one shots, it's also not. I don't know. When I run one shots, I'm a lot less strict with the rules. You know me. When I'm playing a campaign, I like to be correct about the rules, and even in today's game, I'm like, listen, like I make mistakes, and I know people often hate on rules lawyering, but if it's something is a rule and I'm doing it wrong, tell me, because I'll happily correct it, because I want to be as correct as I can with the rules. Whereas a lot of GMs are more hand wavy in their approach, right? They don't care so much about that.
Our opposites on that regard,
Yeah,
because I'm
but
like,
which is fine, right? Neither one of those is wrong. But I think when I do play one shot, I am much more hand wavy with the rules, just because I don't care. Like, right? It's like we're here for a good time, not a long time, right?
No, that's a very valuable point. Maybe even I would say, to go as far as, I would recommend, if you are normally very rules lawyery or very strict with the rules, that a one shot is a good time to kind of loosen up and see how it feels.
It's definitely a good way, you know, if you're running a long campaign and you're feeling very you know, burnout because of all the work you're doing, or all the, you know, just the stress of it all, maybe take a step back and let either some of your players run a one shot, or just throw together a quick hand wavy one shot with not super serious, not paying much attention to the rules.
You just brought up the next point I was.
What's that?
So I have always been a GM coach. I think you have always been a GM coach. You look kind of at your players and you go like, this person is my next apprentice, next Padawan. I got to teach them how to be a GM, because I can clearly see that they would like running games. And it's half of it selfish, because maybe you don't want to play anymore or run the game, you know, and the other half is, you know, you want to see their potential. And so this is where the one shots come in, is that you encourage that person to be like, hey, you know, why don't you throw a one shot? And it lets them dip their toes into GMing or DMing. I think one shot is kind of the perfect solution for first time gaming.
Yeah, I mean, this stream is primarily Pathfinder 2e, right? But we're as a channel, we are a general game mastery channel, right? And one of the things we love to see and love to encourage is new people, you know, stepping behind the screen, so to speak, even if you don't use a screen. That's figure of speech. But anyway, the people trying out GMing for the first time, you know, it's often quite intimidating. Oh, we got a bit of feedback. Hold on one second. Let me figure this out.
I think it's lag on my part.
Okay.
You know, I'm always struggling to keep up with you.
Let me just try something real quick here. All right. So I'll try to talk not as loud either. So, you know, we love to encourage people to try out new, or try out game mastering for the first time, right? Because it's often really intimidating to people. It's often like, oh, like where do I even start? You know, like, do I have the improv chops for this? And I think that a lot of people, where is that feedback coming from?
I don't even see my mic lighting up, so I don't think it's on my end, which is usually it's on my end.
Hold on a second. Oh, you know what? I think I know what it is. 1 second.
No, it's totally on my end.
Was it?
Yeah, I'm seeing my mic light up when you talk.
Let me try turning me down a little bit on Discord.
I'm gonna turn you down. You keep trying, but I'm gonna turn you down.
So, but yeah, in general, we like to encourage people to try out game mastering, and like Jackie said, one shots are a great low commitment way to do that. You know, usually your players know that it's not something super serious, so they're not super concerned if you get things wrong or screw things up. If somebody dies, no big deal. You know, like I think it's a lot more beginner friendly, I guess, as a game master perspective. So I think that's probably one of the most useful. The digital screen. There you go.
It's definitely the new age. We've been seeing so many new GMs kind of show up since, you know, tabletop RPGs have kind of really picked up.
Yeah, I think now that things have entered the mainstream, that a lot more GMs are popping out of the woodwork. I know that when I first started GMing, I was extremely intimidated, and I wanted to run a one shot, but my group of friends who wanted me to GM, who had never played D&D before, and they're like, "Hey, we never played, but we really want to. Can you GM for us?" I'm like, "I'll do a one shot." Like, "Oh, well, we play like every Thursday. Would you be interested in doing like a long running campaign?" I'm like, I guess.
That's a lot to do too.
And I ended up loving it, but you know, there's a high possibility that I wouldn't have loved it, right? And everyone probably would have had a bad taste left in their mouth. So I think that you might, consider maybe starting with a one shot to really make sure it's for everyone. But that was a
And
very
that's
long-winded way of saying
exceptionally
it's
true of
great to start GMing, folks.
that's exceptionally true of starting a one shot for a different game system. Because I know a lot of people are very hesitant, and if you're looking to start a new game system, one shot is a great method for getting your toes wet in that regard. Um,
It
we're
took me
currently on
three
break right
games.
now doing the one shot.
It took me three like multi-session games to really figure out how to GM Fate, like effectively. Those first three games were utterly. I was a terrible Fate GM. Those first three games.
You're talking about your very first games, or
Yes, like
for
my very
Pathfinder 2?
first Fate games I've ever GM'd. The first three, it took me like that many games, and not sessions, but games, before I really figured out how to do it. Because at that time there were no Fate actual plays. There weren't a lot of resources because not a lot of people were playing this game. I got into Fate, I guess you could say, after it's kind of like it's golden years, right? Like it was really huge from like 2004 to 2007 or so. And there's something like that somewhere around there. But then like nowadays it's a lot rarer, and even like in like 2014, 2015 it wasn't super huge. So nowadays you have a lot of like YouTube personalities who have jumped on the bandwagon and started doing actual plays, so you have a lot of references there to kind of compare to. But at the time, like I was just trying to figure out as I went, and it was completely different than anything I was used to. So I mean, yeah, I was trashed. Just me, but I took a look back, and doing one shots was a
first.
What was that?
Did you have somebody run a game for you first?
No. Like I had never played. I started with Fate with GMing. I had never played it before because I had nobody around me who knew how to play it, or most people around me never even have heard of it. I had a coworker who was a really big fan of it, and in hindsight, I should have had them run a game for me first. But they were really into 5e at the time, and they had like 5e games going. They were like a GM for life kind of deal, and they just didn't have time to do it. But they, at work one day, they sat me down and like really explained the system to me, and like it made sense, like conceptually. But once I got into play, I'm like, oh shit, how do I do this? And how do I do this? And how do I do this? And in hindsight, it would have been better for me to do a series of one shots rather than try to run these campaigns that ultimately failed all three times, right? Because they just weren't fun for people, because I was stumbling, and yeah. So I think that, like you said, one shots is a great way to learn a system, because you can very quickly iterate on your skills and look back and say, okay, what did I do right there? What did I do wrong? Right? You run another game. P. Razzo says, "Be the change you want to see."
Right. That's pretty hilarious, because I was in the same boat. Nobody had ever, DM'd or GM'd for me before. I had never actually played in a game. I had only watched people play a Star Wars game in like somebody's basement, and they didn't actually get anything done. They were busy pushing up their glasses and saying "actually" and arguing the rules for a couple hours while I was watching. So I kind of thought that was what was normal to expect from a tabletop game. I was voluntold to be the GM, since I'm the charismatic one, and everybody assumed I was going to be,
Yeah.
And I noticed, like, I think that there's a characteristic to that. Like, the people who start off GMing before getting a chance to play, they end up coming, we end up bringing, I want to say it's our style. Because I watched, like, my friends who I taught how to GM, other people say, like, hey, their style is a lot like yours. And I noticed that, like, from my other friends who had a particular style of play, they were teaching their friends.
Yeah.
And so there's like...
So to be clear, though, I started off as in tabletop RPGs as a player, not a GM. It's just that the first time I played Fate was as a GM, because I didn't have anyone.
My first time to any tabletop RPG, I was GM.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
That's a lot of times it's just how you got to get the ball rolling, right? If you got a group of friends who want to give it who've never played before and want to give it a try, somebody's got to be the GM. So it's
completely doable. Don't be scared. You can do it. I don't know, when you're with like a group of your peers, usually they're busy worrying and thinking about what their character is going to do. They're usually not looking at your game and judging it. That very rarely happens,
especially
during
in a
session,
situation with people who never played before, because they don't know, what you're doing is wrong or right or whatever. They're just trying to figure it out as they go. So
right. And you look at the rules and you'll be like, "This is too complicated. Toss that out." No, John hates that. That's what we do for one shots for sure.
So
we don't.
What was that?
We don't have time to be tracking. We don't have time to be tracking arrows and.
Yeah, if it's a one shot, there's just not. It's just
a one shot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in my longer games like Shifting Sands, I'm much more strict with that kind of stuff, just because it's a game around getting loot and moving loot between places. But in a one shot, I don't give a shit.
I love me some good Diablo style gaming. That is.
We are running up on an hour. Did you have anything more you wanted to cover before, or did you want to?
As far as talking about the shots, I think we're up to date on our vaccinations, but we can cover some other pertinent topics for us. We recently had a bunch of people join in, so you guys have been watching on our Twitch and our YouTube, jumping into our Discord. We just ran a great game on Sunday. That was this morning. For those of you who are tuning in at a later date. And
I don't think we actually did
well.
a Discord announcement, because I was I wasn't at my computer until like the last second before the show was about to start. So unless Jackie took care of it, I never got around to creating the Discord announcement for today's
I got
show. You. Okay, cool. But we decided that we're going to try YouTube out, play around with it a bit, see how it goes. Most of our audience seems to be on YouTube. Like, we get a lot more views on our YouTube VODs than we do on our Twitch streams. So we're going to try this out for a few streams and see how it goes from there. As Jackie mentioned, we did run a Shifting Sands game with a bunch of new people, which was awesome. Love to see new people join in on that game, and really, get a bunch of new characters, new play styles going. It's fun to see how different people play and approach the game. So definitely, if you're interested in a West Marches style Pathfinder 2e game, hit us up in the Discord. We have both that Discord and the Art of Gamemastery, like the regular Art of Gamemastery Discord, to keep the two separate so that people aren't bothered by stuff they don't necessarily care about. See what else. We are on Spotify every week. In fact, Spotify is usually where, other than the stream itself, it's usually the first pre-recorded thing that goes up, just because it's a lot easier to get something up on Spotify than it is on YouTube. And any other, we have all our social networks that we'd love it if you guys follow and subscribe. If you're on YouTube, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon, all that jazz. Help us out on the algorithm. Hopefully doing lives on YouTube will really help us out in that regard as well. We'll see how that goes. Jackie, can you think of anything else?
If you guys have any other streaming platforms, don't hesitate to share us. Let us know. We've been trying to find other streaming groups. We're looking to do some streams, some of our live play sessions. So that is another thing that John and I are working on.
We do have more stuff going up on the website. The companion stuff is almost done. Just some last minute editing, grammar and whatnot, the stuff I really suck at. And then that'll be up. We got some, I mentioned last time that we'll be working on stronghold rules, which may be the next thing. I might actually put that off and do something else that I've been rolling around in my head. I'll let you know once I come to that conclusion. Jackie, do you have any homebrew stuff you got planned? I
do have some homebrew stuff. I have the what did we end up calling we pulled these rules from I think it was the Dungeon Master Guide, or it was the Dungeon Master Guide for Game Master Guide for Pathfinder 2e. What was the rulings we called them for different towns? Like, we had like levels for the towns. That was the stronghold stuff?
Just the settlement. No, strongholds is something different. That's
the settlements.
Settlements is what you're talking about. There's a settlement stat blocks, but...
So I'm working on finalizing the stat block. So over the week, I managed to finish my Bree campaign. I got everything together and I checked in on the players, and it's the holiday season and everybody is super busy.
It'd be like
But
that sometimes.
it was destined to happen. So I have a game ready to go. My town of Bree from Gen Con, I digitized it, fleshed everything out, and put it up on Roll20. So I will be looking to fill slots for that game. I'm probably going to shoot for Thursday. When that goes live, I will probably create like an own special Discord. And if you guys are in our Gamemastery Discord, you guys will get a chance to enter into that. Also, anybody who's on the animal rights advocacy will be doing a separate game for that. It'll be in 5th edition. So I'll be running this game both in 5th and Pathfinder 2e because I want to compare the two. That way I can do some of my own like analysis side by side. John and I had talked about like looking at that kind of data from monster stat blocks to like how players start off at level 1. And we had talked about it mentioned from the action economy. So I'm curious to see how much more performance I'm going to get out of these two since this module is completed and I want to run it through a few times.
Yeah, and to be clear, like I think you're homebrewing almost all of your creatures, right? So like you're not using any of the stuff from the bestiary or bestiaries.
When I homebrew, I usually pull straight from the bestiary as guidelines, and I don't stray from those numbers.
Okay.
So I'm usually just doing reskinning.
Gotcha.
And in this case, there were already stats for the creatures, so I went ahead and used those, and I'll be using since they don't compare between Pathfinder and 5th edition. I don't want to talk about what the creature is because that's half the excitement, right? But they're different levels or threat levels between the two editions, between 5th and 2nd edition.
Yeah.
So it does not pan evenly. So I'm going to have to kind of do something for a level 1 encounter, basically.
Yeah.
But I have that at least as a guideline. So that's something that will be an interesting introspection that we can do for that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what kind of analysis we can make there.
As soon as I can get some people to playing. I know it's the holiday season and you guys are traveling, and it's a lot harder to commit to games. This is technically a one-shot, so it will be, low commitment required for it. So
this is the game we were talking about at the beginning where Jackie ran at Gen Con that lasted a few hours. So.
Right, I think I could probably stretch it to 4. I think that would be an ideal time for one shots. What do you think? Is 2 hours, 4 hours?
I think 3 to 4 hours is fine. Yeah, I think for a one shot, it's easier to go longer, because everyone's there for just they're focused on the game. So I think 4 hours is good. But
I think after 4 hours, there's going to be some gaming fatigue happen where people are going to need to break for food or break for bio breaks.
Definitely.
So I think that covers all the events. Next up, we have picked. What was?
I don't think we've picked next week's yet, did we?
Yeah, we had something for it.
I know you put a bunch of good ideas in our Discord private messages, but I don't know if we actually picked one or not.
Originally for the Twitter poll that we posted. Next time we need to let more
Sandbox,
people know about that Twitter poll. Sandbox. The next subject is Sandbox.
Which will be very interesting because I know that's like really the main way Jackie runs their game. So I'll be interested to see what they have to say there.
Honestly, we should probably like warn people ahead of time. Maybe we should probably do this one on the Twitch, or we'll see how the YouTube analytics work. But if we're doing that next Sunday, we should probably plan for a little bit longer topic since we're definitely going to go over, because you and I both have a lot to talk about as far as what is a sandbox and how to run it.
Right. Look forward to that. We'll post on Twitter whether we're going to be running it on YouTube or Twitch. We'll see what that goes. I think we need to give YouTube a few sessions before we make any determinations there. But yeah, I think that's all I got.
We are going into the holiday season, so our numbers might change based on people's availability.
In fact, or do we have any? Are we taking any days off here soon?
All the holidays did not fall on weekends.
Yeah, you're right.
This time,
We're clear. So sweet. All right. Well, we will see you all next week then. Again, join us in the Discord, hit the like and subscribe button, all that jazz. We'd love to interact with you folks more. If you're watching us on YouTube and whatnot, leave a comment as well. Like, tell us what you thought of this kind of format, what you thought of the switch to YouTube, all that kind of stuff. We'd love to hear your guys' opinions on that. So yeah, until next time, happy gaming.
In the chat, go ahead and tell us about your one shots, people. We'd love to hear about them.